Tyler, we're going to do a bull bear on the metals company. We've done a couple videos on it before, and I want to be clear about a couple things. We've been pretty bearish on the business. The business hasn't really done anything from an operational perspective, and that's what our concern has been. But both of us love the idea of finding a way to get these massively important resources in a more environmentally friendly way to meet what is explosive demand. We both love that idea.
Yeah, look, as much as we all hem and haw at the idea of mining, either undersea or overseas, we need the metals. We need the stuff. And finding ways to get it at scale and at economically viable values is incredibly important. With that in mind, there is always a case in some sense for a mining company.
That's absolutely right. You and I have been successful investors for a long time, and we've done well. And part of the reason we've done well is always being willing to challenge what we believe to be true, whether that's being bearish on something or bullish on something. Trying to disprove what we believe is at the core of being a successful investor. So we're going to do a little bit of that right here. You're going to put on the bull hat. I'm going to put on the bear hat. And that's generally because I'm typically the more optimistic person, and you're certainly more the curmudgeon, poking holes, finding problems and that sort of thing. So you're going to be the bull for the metals company. Before we get to it though, just a reminder, we get to make these great videos because of our partnership with the Motley Fool. The Motley Fool sponsors this video. If you're looking for more great stock ideas, a diversified portfolio is not a bad idea, people. Go to our special link and you can get 10 new great ideas. Fool.com/unscripted. Go to that link and you can find the Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now. Go check that out. Okay, Tyler, put on that bull hat and your bull horns here. Put on your hooves. All right, start pawing at the ground and charge away. Go.
All right. In my view, this is the best bull case I can make for the metals company is, like we said, the area of the Pacific Ocean that it intends to harvest is basically chock full of minerals, I think would be the best way of putting it. The estimates of mineral deposits that are available at the ocean floor are massive. And in what are, we could say, the metals company's actual like places that it intends to mine, it believes it has $25 billion worth of net present value of copper, zinc, manganese, basically all of the industrial metals that is making the modern economy work. And for a company this size, that's not too bad. The other thing that I would say too is if there was ever a time for the metals company to get the green light from a regulatory perspective, it is now. I think in terms of the attitude towards the need for countries to have their own supplies of critical minerals and not being overly reliant on global supply chains is at a recent peak, at least I can think of, in terms of urgency and need.
Yeah.
So regulatory compliance or environmental compliance might be fast tracked in ways that it hadn't been done before. And one thing I'll even use my oil and gas industry experience over time is there is quite a few, I wouldn't call them obsolete, but oil and gas rigs, like things that we would use for drilling for oil and gas, where their effectiveness as drill rigs isn't quite effective because of oil prices, because of things like that. And there's quite a few like available out there to acquire for relatively cheap. If they had to build those things brand new, oh, that's like, we're talking $500 million. But, you know, sometimes they're selling for much, much less than that when the industry has too much capacity. And so there's an opportunity there for somebody who's opportunistic to acquire a fleet of rigs that they could use to suck the minerals off the seafloor. These nodules, they're kind of little rocks, maybe like yay big, that are very, very dense mineral deposits. It presents some unique opportunities in terms of time that we probably haven't seen in most other time periods. So again, like, I don't know if it's going to get better in terms of when the metals company can make it happen, but at least from a vibes perspective and like taking the view, I can't think of a better time for them to actually get this to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And this is, I'm going to throw a couple of bull things on here too that I think are important. This is kind of their business model, right? It's the idea of being able to source those nodules that you were talking about. And what they're claiming is a very cost-effective manner, especially compared to existing mining processes and technologies, to recover the metals that they supply after whatever their end use is and recycle them and to reprocess and resell them again. I mean, they're even talking about metals as a service as part of their business, but we won't get into that. But again, the key is being able to make it more like aluminum, I guess you could almost say, in that we're reusing these minerals when the expected life of their product is over. And there's one more that I think is important too. This guy right here, this is something that a lot of bulls in the company are saying, but Steve Jurvetson, this is a thing that says this is not a sham. It's not just a pump and dump. Steve Jurvetson, of course, has been a very successful executive and now venture capitalist, one of the most successful VC firms that before an ignominious departure from the business that we won't get into because it's not relevant, has been a successful investor and has seeded a lot of successful businesses. So having somebody of his ilk that's not just having thrown a few $1 million to help capitalize the business, but he's the vice chairman and is advising the CEO, that is bullish. I'm not gonna say that it's not. All right, Tyler, I'm gonna put on the bear hat. You ready?
I was going to say, if you're supposed to be the bear today, that is the worst job of being a stock bear I've ever seen.
Okay. So the bear case is really simple. And it's simple in the same way that the company's math is simple. They're saying in the document that they produced, and there are a lot of people that are bullish are pointing to the PFS, the pre-feasibility study that the company has done, is saying, hey, the math is obvious. It's so clear. And I will just say that that document is massively biased. This is not an objective third-party document. But let's assume that it's right. Let's assume that it's right. That's a really positive thing for the business. Okay, Hall, where's the bearish part? There's the actually executing on it and still paying for it. The business has plenty of capital to just run an executive office and keep putting out press releases for years. They certainly have that. They don't have the money for the long term to be able to actually capitalize and build the facilities that they need, acquire the vessels. Yes, they have joint partners with vessels that they're looking to work with on their initial commercialization. That's true. But here's the bottom line. Many an investor's face has been smashed on the rocks of actually coming up with the money to do the thing in mining. It is a brutal industry. Sure, this is a novel process and it's not the same thing as traditional terrestrial mining, but in a lot of ways, guys, this is harder, right? We're talking about miles under the ocean, claims of minimal impact of the environment that frankly haven't been fully vetted, that we don't know if that's true. And the fluid dynamics of the way things move in water is very different than the air and land. So we don't know what are the law of unintended consequences, how that's going to play out here. It's also very at question. They're operating in international waters, and the company is claiming, and bulls are claiming, that the company is able to do this because the U.S. is not a party to the agreement to manage these resources in international waters. Well, there's a few billion people outside of the United States that might disagree with that, right? So how this plays out over the long term is less clear. So I think just to assume the math is easy and it's obvious is extremely, extremely dangerous with a company with a few $1 million in the bank and a great idea. That makes it massively risky. Okay. That's my point. And you can love an idea and you can cheer for it all day and also not be willing to risk your capital because it's massively unproven. And that is really where we are at the metals company. Having Steve Jurvetson on the board, sure, that's great. He's made a little bit of investment. It's change in his couch cushions for him, though. It's irrelevant. This is not somebody that has meaningful skin in the game. So it's always dangerous when you overweight something like having a big investor involved. Tyler, how many companies have you and I followed over the years that have lost a ton of money that had some really smart investors with lots of money that invested in them?
Hey, where did a lot of that happen? Oh, offshore drilling using in offshore resources.
These are tough places to operate, right? My bear case is that it's so massively unproven and undercapitalized at this point. The law of unintended consequences is going to make something change. Something is going to be different than we expect today. And until we actually start to see some sort of real world production with costs that we can extrapolate from that actually happen in the real world, everything else is just a great sales pitch. And that's what their job is to give a great sales pitch. Just because you love an idea and you want to full-throated support that idea doesn't mean that you should risk capital. Famous last words for so many investors that I've seen: even if I lose money, I want it to be successful. If it's successful, you're not going to lose money. Use your brain, not your heart when you invest. That's it. That's my bear case, Tyler.